Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My name is Benjamin. When my wife passed away, my daughter Pamela began to hate me. She believed I moved on from her mother's death far too quickly, that I hadn't loved her the way she deserved. I couldn't defend myself without sounding like I was just making excuses. Everything shifted the day Pamela discovered a journal that turned her entire understanding of me and her mother's death upside down. I married my college sweetheart, Pamela's mom, many years ago. Life back then felt so simple. We were young, still studying, full of hopes and dreams. I first met her through a mutual friend during a campus event. She wasn't even in my field of study. But from the very first conversation, we just clicked. We didn't let our separate schedules get in the way. We found time for each other no matter what. By the time we graduated, I already had a job and enough stability to start a family. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by the people who mattered most. Not long after, she told me she was pregnant. I hugged her, whispered, "We're ready," and that little baby became our only child, Pamela. From the moment she entered our lives, she became our everything. She lit up our home and brought my wife and me even closer together. Looking back now, I don't think any of us could have predicted the road we would eventually walk. Life rarely unfolds the way you plan it. No matter how hard we try to build something stable and happy, there were things completely out of our control. When Pamela turned 4, we began seriously talking about having another baby. We thought it would be good for her to grow up with a sibling. At first, it was exciting. We tracked dates, adjusted our diets, and watched for little signs. Then my wife started feeling unusually tired and complained of discomfort in her throat. We assumed it was a seasonal bug. Just to be safe, we went to the hospital, expecting to hear what we were already hoping for: pregnancy. But that wasn't what we heard. The doctor came in wearing that look, the one that tells you something is wrong before they even speak. He explained they had found a cancerous cell in her throat, in a very delicate, difficult-to-reach area. My chest tightened. I glanced at my wife and saw her eyes go wide before they turned blank. The doctors recommended surgery to remove the cancer and a long period of recovery and monitoring. We agreed immediately. There was no real choice to be made. We had a daughter and a future we were still trying to build. The surgery was scheduled quickly, and thankfully it went well. The doctors were confident they had removed all the cancer and reassured us it hadn't spread to her lungs or nearby tissues. That gave us hope. Recovery was grueling, but my wife was stronger than I will ever be. She endured the pain quietly, never once complaining in front of Pamela, always managing a smile for her sake. Regular checkups became part of our lives. The talk about having another child faded away. She was the one who ended it first, and I didn't argue. Why take that risk when Pamela was already our whole world? After coming so close to losing her mother, I couldn't imagine gambling with that fear again. So we focused on raising Pamela and stayed quietly grateful that we still had each other. For 2 whole years after surgery, life felt like we had finally won. My wife looked healthy again. Every checkup brought good news. Each time, it felt like we were given permission to breathe a little deeper. She began doing the little things she had stopped when she got sick, singing while cooking, laughing more freely. I hadn't realized how much I missed the sound of her voice until it returned. Once the doctors fully cleared her, I asked my boss to reduce my hours. I wasn't chasing promotions anymore. I just wanted to be present. We used that time to travel together as a family. I still remember the trip we took to a lakeside cabin. We spent the day fishing, then sat around the fire at night, sharing stories and laughing. I treasure those memories. It was a peaceful time, a peace I didn't know was temporary. When Pamela turned 10, the cancer came back. And this time, it was aggressive. We went from feeling like we had moved past the worst to hearing she would need prolonged hospitalization and intensive treatment. At first, I clung to hope, telling myself we had beaten this once and could do it again. But her body was weaker now, and the treatments harsher. That year stretched me beyond anything I thought was humanly possible. I had to be her husband, her caregiver, a father to Pamela, and still keep my job. I would spend long hours at the hospital, then come home late at night to help Pamela with her schoolwork. Sometimes I would sneak away just to cry where Pamela couldn't see me. One of us had to hold it together, and since her mother couldn't anymore, it had to be me, even though I was falling apart inside. Watching the woman I had built my life with slowly fade away hollowed me out. I saw her lose weight, lose energy, and on some days, even lose her voice. But she never lost her kindness. Even when she could barely sit up, she would ask how I was holding up or remind me to eat. That's who she was. After nearly a year of fighting, she was gone. My world went completely dark. I stopped caring about work, food, or sleep. If it hadn't been for Pamela, I don't know how I would have kept going. She was the one thing keeping me tethered to life. Her presence, her eyes, so much like her mother's, were the only thing pulling me out of bed each morning. My wife wasn't just my spouse. She was everything I had ever prayed for. Gentle but fierce, smart yet warm. We didn't always agree on everything, but we always found our way back to each other. She was my home. Losing her felt like standing roofless in a storm, expected to live as if nothing had changed. Pamela was shattered. Her bond with her mother was more like a best friendship. I could see the hole it carved in her heart. At first, she barely spoke. Her silence said more than words could. I could feel her anger at the world for taking her mother away. I put on a mask of strength and kept life moving. Even though it felt like I was walking through fog, I had no choice. More than a year passed before I admitted to myself that I had to start rebuilding, not just for me, but for Pamela too. The house still felt like a museum of memories. Her scent lingered in our room. Her favorite scarf still hung behind the door. Some mornings, I'd just stand there holding one of her sweaters, trapped between holding on and letting go. But eventually, I realized clinging to everything was keeping me frozen in grief. So one weekend, I began carefully packing her things. I folded her clothes neatly, boxed them with care, and kept only the ones most meaningful to me. I wasn't erasing her. I was trying to breathe again. During that time, I wasn't completely alone. Both our families checked in regularly, and their support helped more than I ever said aloud. But the person who truly made the biggest difference was Angela, my wife's close friend. Angela had been around even during the hardest times, dropping by with food or watching Pamela when I had to rush to the hospital. After my wife's passing, she didn't disappear like many others did. She kept showing up, cooking dinner when I worked late, helping around the house, making sure Pamela had someone to talk to on the days I was too emotionally drained. Her presence became a quiet comfort. She never pushed or asked for more than I could give. She just stepped in where things were falling apart. I appreciated her deeply, but I didn't realize how complicated that appreciation would eventually become for me, for Pamela, and for the fragile piece I was trying to rebuild. At first, Pamela seemed fine with Angela being around. She didn't complain when I worked late, and I thought it was a good arrangement. But everything shifted the moment she sensed something deeper forming between me and Angela. At that point, it wasn't love, just companionship, shared grief, and understanding. But Pamela saw it differently. To her, it was betrayal. It felt like I had tossed aside her mother's memory too soon. She grew distant, quiet at dinner, avoiding eye contact, answering questions with one-word replies. I thought it was just normal teenage moodiness, something that would pass if I gave her space. But it didn't pass. It hardened into sarcasm, resentment, and eventually open hostility. Anytime Angela came over, Pamela would retreat to her room. She stopped sitting with me in the evenings. The warmth between us was replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable distance. I tried talking to her several times, explaining gently that I wasn't trying to replace her mom, that no one ever could. But Pamela wouldn't listen. She once cut me off mid-sentence and said something that pierced me to my core. "You never really loved Mom, did you? Because if you did, you wouldn't be with her friend like it means nothing." I stood there speechless. Before I could explain, she walked out and slammed the door. After that, I stopped trying for a while. When she got into university, she moved out as quickly as she could, like she couldn't wait to put distance between us. After that, we only had technical check-ins. She called only when she needed something. I gave her space, but it hurt deeply. It felt like I had lost my wife and my daughter. Everything changed during Pamela's final year at university. One quiet evening, I came home to find her sitting in the living room, her shoulders slumped, her face distant. As soon as she saw me, she stood and walked over. Before I could even speak, she wrapped her arms around me in the tightest hug I'd had from her in years. She held on, as if she was afraid I would vanish. "I'm sorry," she kept whispering, over and over, her voice breaking. I froze for a moment, caught off guard. For years, we had spoken only when necessary. Now, here she was crying into my shirt, and all I could do was hold her. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red and swollen. "Dad," she said, "I read Mom's journal." I hadn't seen that journal since the day I packed away my wife's belongings. I remember Pamela watching me from her bedroom doorway back then, silent as I boxed everything. I didn't know she had kept anything, but now she admitted she had held on to a few of her mother's keepsakes. The journal was one of them. She told me she hadn't been ready to open it all these years. She had been afraid it would reopen wounds she had tried so hard to ignore. But the night before, something pushed her to read it, and what she read changed everything. Her mother hadn't just written about her illness or her pain. She wrote about us. She wrote about nights she cried while I held her, how scared she was of dying, not because of death itself, but because she'd have to leave Pamela behind. She wrote about watching Pamela sleep, wondering if she'd remember her voice. And she wrote about me. She wrote how much she leaned on me, how much she appreciated me for staying strong when she couldn't. Even in her final entries, she thanked me for loving her the way I did. But what broke Pamela the most was a specific entry. "If you're reading this, promise me you won't close yourself off. I want you to find peace, find love if it comes. You gave me everything. Don't spend your life drowning in grief." Pamela admitted she hadn't been ready to hear those words before. She had been too angry, too convinced I had moved on too fast. But reading them now, with adult eyes, she saw me differently. She realized I had been grieving, just not in the way she needed me to. I had kept life going while carrying my pain silently. Then she told me something that stunned me. One of the journal entries mentioned Angela. Her mom had personally asked Angela to look after us, trusted her completely, and even wrote that if life ever brought us together, she would be at peace. I was floored. My wife had never told me she had that conversation. All she had ever said was, "She'll be there for you and Pamela when I'm gone." Pamela hugged me again, whispering apologies for the years she had stayed distant, for judging me without knowing the full story. Then she thanked me for not giving up on her, for never shouting at her, for letting her come around in her own time, even though it hurt. In that moment, I finally told her the truth. I had never taken things further with anyone, not because I didn't want companionship, but because her anger had weighed so heavily on me. I didn't want to put one more wall between us. She looked at me and told me I deserved happiness, that she finally understood what her mom wanted, and that she'd be happy knowing I found peace, even if it meant letting someone else into my life. That was the first time in years I felt real calm settle over me. But more than any permission to move forward, what mattered most was getting my daughter back. That hug, that forgiveness, that understanding, it meant everything. The wall between us was gone. That night, we sat together quietly for a long time. The pain didn't vanish, but the weight on my chest had lifted. As I looked at her, my little girl, now a grown woman, I knew her mother would have been proud. That was the closure I had been waiting for. Not just to grieve my wife, but to finally heal with my daughter. And that meant more to me than anything.